Yes, ma'am.
Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of PTVS Sathe College, Department of Information Technology, I, Ms. Larissa Pegado, would like to extend a warm welcome to our Principal, Dr. M.R. Rajwade, Vice Principal and IQAC Coordinator, Dr. D.M. Nerkar, our speakers for today, Mr. Satyen Jadeja and Ms. Meera Sanghvi, faculty members and student participants who joined us on Zoom platform and YouTube. Artificial intelligence has emerged to be the next big thing in the field of technology. It is at the core of several emerging technologies like machine learning, big data analytics, NLP, robotics, and IoT. AI is playing a major role impacting the future of every industry and every human being. So, taking into account the relevance of AI for contemporary IT students and its undeniable hold on the job market, the Department of Information Technology, in association with the Internal Quality Assurance Cell, has organized this one-day webinar, Artificial Intelligence, Relevance and Future for Students. Now, I'd like to request Mr. Arvind Khade, Coordinator, Department of Information Technology, to give the opening remarks.
Thank you, Larissa. Hello, everyone. I would like to welcome you all to this webinar. When we were deciding a topic to do a webinar, AI was the first topic that came to our mind. AI is not a concept of the future anymore, but it's here today and here to stay. There are so many examples of the use of AI in the present time where it works in the background and we are not even aware of it. Also, it is a subject that we have as a part of our curriculum. In today's session, we will understand the uses of AI, its everyday applications and trends in the industry. Now, I would like to request our principal, Dr. M.R. Rajwade, to say a few words. Thank you. Over to you, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Arvind, and I'm indeed grateful that both our speakers of the day, that is Satyen Jadeja and...
So you are not audible, sir.
Hello? Hello? Now is it okay? Hello? Yeah. I'm indeed very, very happy that both of our speakers of the day, that is Satyen Jadeja sir and Meera Sanghvi madam, both of them found time today and are here with our students. The department which we are talking about is the Department of IT. Is very much an industry department, I would say, because other subjects which we teach are just to share with our guests. Ours is a multi-faculty college and we teach a wide spectrum from humanities to science to commerce and media, management studies, and amongst them is our department of IT. So this is the department which is closest to the most happening technology scenario which is unfolding. And when we get people like you, sir and Sanghvi madam, I think our students tend to benefit a lot. And dear students, I think webinars of this kind, when they are organized, I think those are the most important moments for you to share the live experience of industry through these experts. It is somewhat like, if I have to give an example, it is like you are in a train, you're traveling, you're looking outside the window, the real world is outside. And maybe your world in which you are, you're kind of virtual. So through these people, there is a window to this whole scenario which is developing, and very soon the students will be part of that real life scenario. And there can't be anything better than these stalwarts in their own fields. And I welcome them with these words. And I have to commend my IT department, our IT department as such. They are consistently being at it throughout the pandemic. And even before that, there were one of the, I should say, partly organized departments in our college. I congratulate them for this particular venture. And once again, welcome both the guests with the college, which is a part of Palliative Vidyalaya Association, a long tradition of education I can say proudly, of 100 years.
Thank you, Principal Sir, for your words of support and encouragement. Dear participants, it's my great pleasure to introduce our first speaker for today, Mr. Satyen Jadeja. Mr. Satyen Jadeja is currently Assistant Director, Financial Services at IBM India and has extensive experience of 25 years in technology and BFSI sector. He has deep experience in strategic consulting and leading complex transformational engagements for banks and financial institutions. He brings in domain expertise and advisory on digital transformation, AI, data, blockchain, and intelligent automation solutions to deliver client value and stakeholder expectations. Before joining IBM, Mr. Jadeja led the strategy and business development at Ananto and Hughes Communications. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Ajwade, for inviting us. Thank you, Erwin, for organizing this. I think this is a very relevant, very happening topic right now, and I should compliment your college to really take a cognizant of this emergent field of artificial intelligence. And I came to know also from that you're also organizing a course around that. So I'm really thankful to for the professor and principal sir to invite us to this webinar. And I'll try my best to give you a perspective on AI. I think it's a much vast topic, and I think no time is enough, but let me give a kind of a perspective and let me share. So what I'll do is I'll share my presentation and kind of take you through that the whole aspect of where we are in terms of artificial intelligence. So can you see the screen right now?
Yes, we can.
Yeah. Thank you. So and also there was a perspective of the industries going through the phase of adopting to the digital, right? So there are two parts here. I mean, one is that industries are going through a kind of a transformation, and I think the pandemic has accelerated the adoption of digital in last 18 months. I mean, we are seeing the kind of impact the various industries are having, and they are forced to accelerate their digital strategies, which they were kind of putting it on a back burner. So that is one part of it. And the second part is that in this digital adoption, there are various technologies creating a play around that, right? And in that, artificial intelligence has a significant role to play. And I will say that even before the pandemic, we have been going through some stage of accelerated transition into various industries, banking, telecommunications, your big tech industries. You are seeing, like, see, there's organizations like Zomato and Swiggy, which you all interact with. In 5 years, have gone from where to where, right? I mean, that's the power of digital, that they can kind of accelerate their business and create a multi-billion-dollar businesses in 5 years. So that's a great example of digital. And this is getting pervasive. It is not restricted to one or two sectors, but you more and more you'll see that more and more industries, more and more sectors are embracing digital technology. And those who don't will kind of will be really left behind and not be competitive in their particular sectors. And if you see these 4 stories that I'm telling you is last 10 years stories, right? And you see they've created multi-billion-dollar organizations. Talk about Uber, we all experience it. Today, Uber even gives you a flexibility of hiring an auto through an app, right? And that this is a worldwide phenomenon, and they don't own a single car. And today, through this whole digital business, they have created a massive multi-billion-dollar business, right? Airbnb, they don't own a single room, right? And they create a multi-billion-dollar businesses. And this is all power through the power of digital that they can create that. Alibaba is the last 10-year phenomenon, and then they created multi-billion-dollar businesses. So, sorry, digital businesses are kind of accelerated, right? We have heard about certain companies who are like 20 years, 30 years to reach some level of volumes or reach a global scale. But these kind of organizations have done it very quickly. And I mean, you all must be 100% on the Instagram and Snapchats and the Facebook, and then they don't own the content, but the content is of the user. But they have created a multi-billion-dollar valuation of their organization, right? These are the examples of what we call as a digital platforms, right? And most of the sectors and industries are going through this transformation. So if we look at it, that why these organizations have become so successful, they are digital first in nature. I mean, they started their business digitally first, right? They didn't have a brick and mortar business like a shop nearby your street, but they started their whole business digital first. And if you look at it, that what are the technologies that are driving this kind of successful businesses, we really need to see. And these businesses, as you see, it has been exponential. I mean, 10 years back, nobody would have thought about what is Instagram or a WhatsApp, right? We didn't know what was WhatsApp. If somebody had asked somebody in 2008, have you heard about WhatsApp? They said, what is that? But today, I mean, it's almost 2 billion accounts in the world, maybe plus, we don't know that, but it's expanding exponentially. So what is this driving this exponential growth that we are seeing in these industries, right? And I mean, if you look at the top Fortune 100 organizations, 15 years back, there's a list of names there. And today, when you see that list of top Fortune 100 organizations in the world, has changed. I mean, you have seen all these digital companies really taking up the top slots, and see how Amazon is growing, how Google is growing. So these are exponential set of businesses that has kind of impacted all of us. It's not a limited impact, but it's impacted all of us. And what are the forces behind it? And today I'll just touch upon artificial intelligence. That's one of the biggest factors. If you today ask any of these successful digital organizations, they'll say AI is part of our core part of our strategy and our business model. Then there are other set of exponential technologies like blockchain, intelligent automation, robotics automation, cloud, cybersecurity, right? And these are each itself is a massive areas of impact that they bring in the digital. And you see these examples on the right hand side. This is a kind of a magical concoction of set of technologies coming together to create a new business model or a new business process platform enabled by these set of technologies. And this is just, we are at, I'll say, the very initial cusp of this whole revolution that is happening, because some sectors are ahead and we'll cover a little bit later. But today, my focus is on all going to be on artificial intelligence. And this term is very fascinating. I mean, but is this term a new term? No, this thing was thought about way back in 1950s. That's what we call as birth of AI. And then over a period of time, it has continued to evolve. In between, there was a lull, because while the concept was great, there was no enough available infrastructure to really cater to the techniques of artificial intelligence. This word was coined way back in 1954. But over a period of time, in last 15 years, why there has been an acceleration of an interest of artificial intelligence? Because two main reasons. One was cheap computing power. And you would have studied in your education that the computing power is kind of growing exponentially, the Murphy's law and all that. So that the point where we have reached is there's enough computing power. There is a very low cost storage available. So you can store large amount of data, which is very crucial for doing artificial intelligence. And Alan Turing was the person who kind of created the whole thought about the whole intelligent machines and things like that. And you would have kind of brought the grasp of it. But what I'm trying to say is that while the term is old, the concept is old, but it has got relevance now thanks to very high performance computing, very low cost storage, and the emergence of algorithms, right? The more complex algorithms in last 15, 20 years. And that's kind of helping the whole artificial intelligence to kind of accelerate and its adoption in businesses, research, and various technology areas. So this is the kind of genesis that we are seeing. And obviously, there were some marquee events, the IBM Watson doing things with Gary, winning Jeopardy in 2011, the Google's event on the gaming, right? So those kind of marquee events are happening. And that's where we are kind of seeing acceleration of artificial intelligence technology. So if we say that, yes, this technology is seeing a light of the day in last 15, 20 years, and we are still at the very initial stages of this technology. Obviously, it draws attention of the policymakers, researchers, academics, industry. And there has been a study by PricewaterhouseCoopers that artificial intelligence will boost the productivity over the coming decade and has a potential to add almost $15 trillion to the GDP, the global GDP. And obviously, there has been some kind of merit to that study. And we are seeing that in last 4 years, more and more adoption happening across academics, industry, and research and everywhere. Including all of us experiencing it, and I'll give you some examples as we go on there. But this is where we are, and as if we say that the $15 trillion economic impact will be brought by artificial intelligence. One important is it is going to help to improve the labor productivity. It will help you give better customer service, personalization. It will help you save time. It will bring in better quality in every aspect of life. Right, and juxtaposed to that is Gartner is a very, research are well respected worldwide, and they always come out with a hype cycle of technologies for every technology. And obviously, I just highlighted here part of the artificial intelligence. So we are seeing a hype cycle, and there are some things which are moved ahead, but we are still in the world of narrow intelligence. And when the world of artificial general intelligence, we are far away. I mean, it will take maybe 20, 30 years till we start hitting the complex world of unsupervised learning and artificial general intelligence. In between, there will be a set of innovations happening on various fronts, whether it's on the deep learning, machine learning, and other areas. So I just wanted to set this context to give you that artificial intelligence, the term emerged late 1950s. There was a kind of an AI winter in between because there was not, while the construct was good, we couldn't have the sufficient technology to address that concept of artificial intelligence. But last 50, 20 years, thanks to great computing power, storage, cloud, and other technologies helping to, and algorithms to really accelerate the adoption of AI. And now we are at the initial stages. We are seeing that almost $15 trillion worth of GDP contribution is expected, and there will be similar reports from McKinsey's of the world and other consulting and large thought leaders in this area. So having understood that market, sometimes artificial intelligence and machine learning and all this is kind of very interchangeably used, and Meera will help us later on, guide us on this much more. But just I wanted to lay a little bit a very high level perspective. What is AI key components? And think AI and human kind of set of capabilities. As a human, we have eyes, ears, we speak, we understand. we have a brain which kind of keeps storing the knowledge, and the knowledge keeps on increasing, right? So same way, the machine learning aspect of, so we'll say that the artificial intelligence, maybe 6 constructs are subset of a AI. I'll say that. Maybe there you can add 1 or 2 more. Everybody has its little bit of interpretations here and there, but primarily machine learning is one part of it, where we'll go a little bit deeper on that part. Then natural language processing. So your ability to understand, when I'm communicating with you in English or Hindi or Marathi, you are able to understand, right? So can it happen between machine to human, human to machine, and machine to machine? So all that is part of natural language processing. There is an interesting field on natural language generation. I'll share a snippet if we get some time. The vision part, we have eyes, and when we are, like, we are communicating, we are seeing each other, right? That way, can we empower the computers to have a image recognition, right? And I'll share some examples around that, what's happening there. Speech to text, text to speech, this is very big research area in AI. And the whole automation. So, I mean, today you see more and more factories getting automated. I mean, you run a massive mega factories, and you'd have seen some of the documentaries on that, and run by very few people. You don't need multiple people to run a factory because everything is automated in that. Or massive warehouses of Amazon is completely automated, where they pick up your packet and deliver to your home. Everything is automated, and they're talking about drones and things like that. The expert systems is very specialized area, the unmanned aerial vehicles, the drones, the automated submarines, things like that. Very deep research area, big interest area. And these are the 6 I feel are the key components of AI. So we should not mix up AI is equivalent to machine learning. So machine learning, NLP, vision, technologies, speech technologies, those are part of AI. So AI is a larger umbrella, and these set of technologies are kind of each with its own research and impact it brings is phenomenal. I mean, we are just hardly using some of these technologies right now. So I'll just briefly touch upon machine learning. So simple is that you would have studied in your school y equal to ax plus b as the simplest of equation. So you can predict y if you know x and your a and b constants, right? So that's the simplest of the, I'll say, machine learning example I can give. But as the complexity of data is more, you need very complex algorithms to interpret and predict what is the y there, right? Because the complex equations to assess the data and then come up with the right prediction value of y, right? The y could be easy a target of my insurance. Y could be that Amazon, if you're buying something on Amazon, you're buying one book, and then suddenly a thing will pop up. Why don't you buy this book also? So that's all the recommendation systems coming in, part of your machine learning set of capabilities, right? And obviously there are multiple, I will not touch on this areas of supervised and unsupervised learning, but it's more about self-learning is more supervised, unsupervised learning is more about getting the data and just analyzing and coming out with the patterns and then leveraging that insights and prediction thereof. But the breakthroughs happening in last decade in machine learning has been the neural networks and the deep learning. So I'll say the deep learning is a subset of machine learning, and that has brought in significant interest after the Google's AlphaGo. And if you search the YouTube, you'll get a complete documentaries around that, how AlphaGo computer beat the best AlphaGo player on this game, right? So the neural networks are very akin to what we have as in our brain, the neurons and how neurons communicate. Same way they have kind of constructed an algorithm based on this kind of neural network, and which helps us to do much more better prediction and recognition. And obviously I just listed some of the very advanced algorithms happening in the neural network. Beyond that, I won't try to cover here. But what are the applications of deep learning? And deep learning also has accelerated because they started leveraging if you understand the computer, you have a CPU and there is also graphical process unit. So what they said, to do deep learning, you require much very complex computations on your computers, including mainframes or supercomputers, whatever you say. But when we started leveraging the GPU power also, that's where the deep learning could come out with results and amass mass amount of data for training and the prediction purpose. And obviously the deep learning has a huge set of emerging applications, whether it's in gaming, image generation, natural language processing and generation, things like that. And there are some examples here. What I have listed shown is some even the art creation, right? Then through the deep learning, it's creating its own art. On the right hand side, you are seeing some examples where it is identifying the animals within the picture, including the train. On the right hand side, it is saying that there's a blue train is traveling. I mean, so it is not just identifying itself as a train, but it's a blue colored train. So that's the complexity of computer vision powered by deep learning algorithms. So sometimes we also say that we are living in the algorithm economy, right? That there are so many complex algorithms and we are making our lives, touching our lives one way or other, that these algorithms are now going to control more and more. So we are going into that. Now, if you see these pictures, none of the pictures or the persons are actually existing on this world. So these are called deep fakes, right? And they are generated through something called generative adversarial networks, a kind of a AI technique based on deep learning. And this has become a big topic during the US election. So what happened was that in the elections, there were people who kind of created fake Facebook accounts using these kind of identities, and they started kind of propagating certain pro or against government agendas, and it became a big debate, right? So if you see each of these people, none of them people are real in this world. They are fakes. I mean, they don't exist in this world, and these images have been created by the deep learning protocol, right, on the algorithm. So this is, and I would encourage the students to do much more research on this and see what is the world is kind of going through in the social media world. How you, without a fake identity, you can start creating a kind of a euphoria or a panic, and without any existing news, because today we are bombarded with fake news, fake people, fake news, right? So this is some examples, I'll say, that is examples of deep learning in a bad way. That you can do many good things, and that's where our focus should be. The other part was that if you see on the first chart, if you see that earlier the ability of a computer to recognize the image and the entity within has improved more and more. So the error rate has kept coming down and going down and down and down. So you throw any image, and then the probability is that with a very low error rate, it will say, oh, there's a dog in the picture, or there's a cat in the picture, or there is a train, as I highlighted, things like that. And same thing on the right hand side, if you see the speech recognition research has now we are like almost human like errors is happening. So this is where we are kind of going towards. And these are some examples. At the same time, as I was mentioned to you, a simple example that the performance of the computing and the Murphy's laws, the academics would be thrilled to know that that's something happening here. But yes, the performance has grown. And if you see on the right hand side, the GPU performance is growing. And that is what is supporting all your artificial intelligence initiatives, the algorithms. You can run more complex algorithm on much larger big data sets and things like that. And the horizon, we are now obviously we hear about IBM talking about quantum computing, Google talking about quantum. So that all set of technologies, we are also in a very initial stage. But eventually, when these technologies become more and more mature, you will leverage that set of technology to get much more computing power and run much more powerful algorithms to kind of give insights into largest problems, right? Whether it's poverty, health, or infrastructure and things like that. So this is where we are going. So that's where we are. And I would like to say that we kind of understood uh, artificial intelligence. What are the subsets of artificial intelligence? We talked about machine learning. We talked about subset of machine learning called deep learning. And I would encourage the students to really go through the deep learning, what it is changing. I mean, phenomenal documentaries are available on that. I would say that, and then we talked about the natural language processing, computer vision, expert system, and we can go on and on this, right? But very important thing, I think from you as a BSc IT student, MSc IT student, you are accustomed to programming in Java and things like that. We are little bit transitioning into something called cognitive computing, where you are computers can understand, reason, and learn in a natural language. So you don't have to program a computer. You have to first train it, and then it keeps learning on its own. So we are moving into world of a cognitive computing, and we are seeing some of those aspects coming to the fore, whether you are engaging with chatbots of insurance companies, banks, or your telecom companies. Everybody is creating a chatbot on their portal, and you can engage them in a natural language and resolve your queries. So those kind of things are happening on this part of it. So we understood the artificial intelligence, what are the components of artificial intelligence. We understood cognitive computing. Now we say, okay, this is all exciting. What is the adoption happening in the industry, right? Which sectors are ahead, which sectors are behind? Obviously, the high tech, all your high tech companies, the Google, Facebook, Amazon, really leading the way. Today, you know that Amazon, 22% of their revenues come through cross-sell of through using analytics. So you buy one mobile phone, they'll smartly give you, why don't you buy the mobile phone cover, right? And you actually create a bundle and you buy everything, right? So they give you that nudge through the power of AI and analytics. So that's a personalization they are bringing on that. So high tech is much ahead. A lot of banking is big because wherever there is a complex matrix, you guys would have studied, you all would have studied matrix problems, right? You have n number of products and you have n number of customers. Which likes what? I mean, it becomes a matrix problem to solve. And you all must be watching Netflix, right? And Netflix is also has the same problem because they have millions of customers and have millions of movies, right? So how to identify which one is liking what and then give you a personalized recommendation to you on your Netflix when you open up your phone or your on your smart TV, and you'll see the recommendations coming in. And that's all the power of data, and that's what drives their business. The more you see and the more valuable those companies become. So they want, that's a complex problem to solve, and that's where AI comes in, helping you solve that. So obviously this is it's a very tip of the iceberg flavor that I wanted to give in terms of where the industries are. There's opportunities across, whether it's in infrastructure, telecom, consumer packaged goods, retail, travel, transportation. You would have heard about a lot of things about autonomous cars, right? In US, a lot of things happening. That's all driven by AI. And within the organization, if somebody says that obviously the customer facing organizations, the IT, marketing, advertising, operations, they are living some are in mature state, some are in initial stages of adoption of AI. So how do we put AI to work? What are we going to do? I mean, one is that we are going to predict and shape future outcomes. For example, you would have taken an insurance policy, your parents would have taken an insurance policy. Every year they have to pay the premium. Now the insurance company's business is dependent on the premium. So they can run algorithms and analytics to predict who is going to pay the insurance premium the next year. What is the likelihood that person X will pay this insurance premium next year? They can actually predict. And where they see the low probability, they will actively engage with you, maybe start calling you earlier, maybe and at the right time or best channel that you are trying to do. That's the example I like to say. Or For example, you on Ola and Uber, you are trying to book a cab. So there's an algorithm running to match where you want to travel, which is the nearest driver available. This is that the algorithm will suggest that this is the driver, and then when the driver accepts it, you are allocated a car. So predicting and anticipating the traffic, I mean, they create a monetization models around it. When there's a peak rush hour, they increase the value. So all that is those business monetization models that they bring in using AI. Automate decisions, processes, huge area, and Mira knows this. Back office, you see hundreds of people doing very repetitive work. Can AI help us to predict, automate decisions, processes, right? And reimagine new business models. Today, 5 years back, your Swiggy's was not there, right? Now today, Swiggy is taking away through a platform model. Basically, people are looking for eating, and the restaurants who want to expand their customer base, Swiggy comes in as a platform and kind of expands the customer base, and in between as an arbitrator of information, it becomes a multi-billion-dollar business, right? That's a platform model that we are bringing in. So, and these kind of platforms, when they're powered by AI, that's where you start seeing significant work coming in. I work a lot in banks, and so if you see that AI from a testing purpose is moving more and more to production stage, right? You see most of the global banks, large banks are using AI, whether it's a customer side of it, the fraud and risk side of it, compliance, cross-sell, upsell, automation, back office part of it. So you are seeing a significant work happening in the banks globally as well as in India. And I'll share you some examples. But incidentally, you know that that today in the financial markets, take for example share trading. In US, 75% of the trading happens by algorithm-driven trading. No more manual trading is happening. Only 25% people trade on manually. 75% trading is happening through AI-driven algorithms. You can't match up with the speed of where the AI decide what to buy, what volume to buy, when to sell. Everything is driven in AI. And this is a reality. I'm not saying this is a future. It's already happening. 75% of the trading volume on NASDAQ, NYSE is happening to algorithm-based trade. And that's what I'm saying, that impact we'll see more and more happening across. And what very interesting, and I was involved in one of these projects where the State Bank of India, those who are State Bank of India customers may download this YONO app, because State Bank was driving a digital transformation. They were like an old people bank, and they wanted to attract the millennials, and they created a complete digital transformation platform called YONO. And you can download that app if you're a State Bank of India customer, where you are not only getting digital banking services, you can buy financial products, your insurance, mutual funds, everything. Not only that, you can also do online marketplace. So you can buy things from Amazon, Myntra, Flipkart. You can book a cab, you can book a ticket, you can buy flowers. So this is a game-changing thing. What the State Bank of India has done is a phenomenal success of an example of a digital transformation and powered by AI. So they bring in a lot of AI analytics into their model, understanding consumer behavior and things like that into the. And I would urge all of you to experience this YONO app, right? And this is just small example, but if you see the adoption of AI in hospitals, understanding cancer predictions, Medtronic is kind of helps predict a hyperglycemic event, which is very critical in a diabetic person who is a diabetic. Can I predict when you're going to get a hyperglycemic event? That's happening right through the usage of AI. On the petroleum, Woodside is one of the largest petroleum companies, and they kind of help they have very expensive rigs and drilling mechanisms. They can predict which drill is failing, because any failure is millions of dollars of revenue loss for them. So using predictive maintenance on that. And once again, the Netflix is here. you see how they are getting personalized. They are keep understanding you individually, what you are seeing, what you are not seeing. And the moment you finish one binge watching, you suddenly the one more thing will say, why don't you watch this? Right? And so they keep tempting you to watch more and more through the power of AI and recommendations, right? That's where we are going. Another very important field, and that's where we are going to see a lot of adoption of AI is in the world of cyber security. So there's a now imagine that the hackers, if they start using AI in trying to hack organizations, penetrate organization, you need to have a very counter measures to address how these attacks can be prevented. The ransomware in last year, the ransomware in the COVID environment has shot up. Large organizations are hold to ransom till they pay up. Their systems are absolutely beyond their control. That's where things like data pattern identification, anomaly detection, workflows, understanding the cybersecurity attacks and how to prevent. The AI is going to become more and more relevant. And this is a very big area, very interesting area. Cybersecurity and AI coming together, big area. Another interesting part is that I just listed. See, the impact is not limited to few sectors, but you see the top AI 100 fintechs in the world. It's across different sectors, across geographies. These are some names I want to leave you with, but to understand that everybody is saying that every AI has a deep impact in various businesses that they are performing. Now you can say that all this is great. What's in it for me? What do I do? So I have kind of simplified something for you as a student, that think about an AI ladder, that it's an approach to accelerating your understanding to AI and how I can become a part of AI modeling and as a data scientist and things like that. Little bit, not much, but just it's like collecting the data, making data for your what you want to first start with what is the business problem you're trying to solve. So collect the necessary data, organize the data in a structured manner. Then once you have organized the data in a very structured manner, then you decide which algorithm should I use. So part of that supervised learning, unsupervised learning, deep learning, machine learning, natural language processing, depending what kind of algorithm I should use. And then once I created the model, I test the model, I validate the efficacy of the model, and it is ready to be deployed. I should integrate with my front-end customers or back-end compliances or risk and fraud, things like that. So this is how you can think about a four-step simple AI ladder: collect, organize, analyze, and infuse. That way you can really think with that. And when you do this kind of a part of that, data science is like a team sport. It's not one person can do everything. There are roles and responsibilities within data science, and we did not go in detail, but basically you understand the scope, bring in the right data, build and test the models, and deploy and run them. So that's where I wanted to give that. Second part is, sorry, open source technologies are get increasing everywhere and helping us in innovation. So we are a various technologies. So if you say, okay, I'm interested in AI, what kind of technologies are available? Simple ones like Python, R, right? And various other technologies for your model building. But you also need technologies to process the data, analyze the data, right? So you need data platforms, big data platforms to store and process that data. And then the algorithms part of it is to this kind of libraries of R and Python and Scala. There are deep learning libraries. You may note down something like Kafka, Scikit, and those kind of libraries are very useful in when you want to build up deep learning kind of a model. At IBM, I think post our chairman Arvind Krishna taken over, we are now focused. We call ourselves a hybrid cloud and AI focused organization. So IBM's focus is going to be on hybrid cloud and AI technologies, and we will help our customers on helping solve some of those complex problems, right? And we are seeing a lot of we are trying to make AI very simple to consume to the organization through various technologies like auto. I'm not going detail. Last part what I'll is important, and I think even Meera will touch upon that. But I think there's a good AI and bad AI, as we saw, right? So as AI advances, the humans and AI systems increasingly work together. It is essential we trust, because a bad data can create a havoc, right? And we have seen that some of the organizations on the social media platforms, they had to withdraw their systems because something it started misbehaving, started saying bad words and things like that. So it is very important, and most of the global organizations understand that the trusted and ethical AI is the way. Purpose of AI is to aid humans and not replace them. It has to be a symbiotic relationship where we work together. It is what we call as augmented intelligence sometimes also, because it will augment the productivity, the efficiency and all that. And obviously the roles and things will change, but it is supposed to be for the social good, right? And there will be actors who will be against this, but we need to be, as a collective wisdom, the society has to move forward on on the trusted AI, fairness, transparency, biases. Incidentally, or bias was something where they developed certain models in US where it was only favoring white people, because the data was only collected for white people. That's where the bias of the models was created. But that's why the biases are very important. So you bring a very homogeneous data for your algorithm. So that's where we are. And it's very amazing to see that Alan Turing, who said in 1954 that we can only see a short distance ahead, but we can see plenty there needs to be done. And we are in 2021, and I think it's still plenty needs to be done. And it's just amazing, right? That we are still at very initial stages of it. So I'd like to summarize, I think, how the world is digitally transforming. All sectors are really going through a massive set of transformation, especially post-pandemic era, and we are still in pandemic. One of the technology, artificial intelligence technology, while it existed, last 15 years has gained tremendous importance. And we saw that what are the components of artificial intelligence, whether it's from machine learning to natural language processing to computer vision. I gave some examples to you in terms of how machine learning is being used in insurance, in banking, and Amazon uses it, how Netflix uses it. We also talked about how do we create an AI ladder, so that how we can deploy AI in the organization, and what kind of approach we should use, the kind of tools we use. I'm sure maybe you have studied a lot in your subject area, and this kind of helps you, give you a more practical perspective where we are. So that's where I would like to finish 25 minutes, although it's a massive topic. But thank you, Professor. Thank you, Principal Rajwade sir, to inviting me. Absolute pleasure to interact with your students. So we'll take the questions later on. Thank you, and back to Meera and Professor. Thank you.
Thank you. So Larissa, do you want to hand that back, and then do I take it over, or you want me to get started?
Yeah, ma'am. I'll have the pleasure of introducing you to our participants. Thank you, sir. That was indeed insightful and provided the much needed clarity on AI and related technologies like machine learning, deep learning, data science, their applications, and the implications on career prospects. Now I'm glad to introduce our equally illustrious next speaker for the day, Ms. Meera Sanghvi. Ms. Meera Sanghvi is lead robotics process automation with HP. Ms. Sanghvi is a high-performing leader with expertise in operations, M&A, diverse teachers, strategy building, and optimizing organizational processes, performance measurement, and infrastructure to maximize business results in the information technology industry. She is a skilled professional who transforms strategic plans into workable solutions and benchmark performance against key goals. At HP, she manages large-scale program deployments of robotics automation with expertise in the end-to-end cycle. She is an industry speaker with more than 40 plus talks in the past couple of years. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you so much. And first of all, I would like to begin with doing a basic test. Is my audio okay? And can you see my screen?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much for confirming. And congratulations on 100 years of Parle Tilak Vidyalaya Association. I think it's momentous, right? I mean, 100 years of anything is a big achievement. So I'm sure there are a lot of lessons that even you could teach, and I could definitely benefit for the fact that I'm here. And I have done numerous talks, and every talk has changed me a little. So I would start with a learning quote for each of you guys here, that learning has to be continuous. And when we say, there's always that one more thing. And that's what I at least strive for. My every year's goal is more like, what else can I learn? Like this year, I'm trying to learn waveboard with my daughter, who's a 7-year-old kid. But that's something that, every year we can learn something. And I'm hoping by the end of this session, there is at least 1 or 2 things that you've learned. And that is my sole ambition at this moment. So with that, let's get started. If we talk about the entire industry, the biggest thing that has happened in the recent past is the fact that the last 2 years have become a benchmark against the rest. And that is just how the world is changing. And that is changing so quickly. While all of us have had predictions, have read about it, what has changed is the fact that the speed at which all of these have to sometimes start working forward, and in certain cases go back on a hold or a pause. So what you see here, which is like a lot of you will frown saying, how is it just 5% that is automatable? The reality is that that 5% is the length and breadth of things. So when I say that is the 5%, in different spaces, like earlier we never thought, in certain examples, never did we ever imagine an automation or any sort of learning or a machine coming into picture. But the reality is that that has come in. And the more we see this 5% is being reassessed every time. So that 5% is an evolving number on the work that we do. So that 100% is always changing. That's just how it is. It's like the compound interest in the reverse order. If we now talk about what is it that it is to have this, I mean, you can start with what's in it when I graduate from my college, that why should I be looking at any of this? I would urge you to look at it because there are days that are in the office, and I have had those days as well, where you don't want to spend a few hours every day doing the same activity every single day. And that's just the way sometimes work works, right? I mean, if somebody were to tell you every single day, spend an hour, go through this, you have to write the same information over and over again. You're going to do it for a month with an excitement, 2 months with an excitement, maybe an year, and that's a stretch. But you're not going to be able to do it for a few years with an excitement. And that is where you have to look at technology to enable you. It's about how do you make a mundane, how do you make it to a meaningful? Things that I love, how can I do more of it? And how can I do less of what I don't like? And that's something as students, you have a full control over, which I think is liberating to a large extent, because A, you're going through a course that's about technology. B, you're getting the exposure of understanding and hearing from people who come from the corporate or the companies like me and, Satyam here. So I guess this is where you leverage and make the most out of it. Now, when you look back, of course, there are a lot of examples that you've heard, previously, but I'd like to quickly talk about certain examples, right? I mean, every time that you go into, say, a doctor's office, do you want the doctor to be looking at the screen and going, tell me your name, tell me your details, tell me your age, tell me? It is not that exciting. But if a doctor were to just tell you saying, I see that the last time you visited here and you had a stomach upset, is it all right now? That's a conversation you and I would like to have when we walk into a doctor's office. Similarly, there are a lot of things that you would want, say, our scientists to do. You would like, for example, the speed at which I was talking about a few minutes ago, the speed at which action is being taken, it is because it's data driven. It's backed up with data. It's backed up with, a faster processing. Humans are the same. We have all, we've all gone through pandemics, maybe, a century ago, and before that, and before that. What has changed? And which is why I say the last 2 years have been a good example in certain cases, but I wouldn't take the COVID example just yet, because we have to come out of it successfully to say this is a great example. So, but what is happening is the speed at which things are being done is what is, exciting for everybody in the technology space to look at. Now, let's look at some of the examples. Now, these are slips that I'm hoping none of you have ever seen. None of you college students have ever seen. But these are things that I used to do for my parents when I was a 9 or 8-year-old, because this was my graduation, to say, you cross the road, you go and get some money, and here's 100 rupees. You're going to fill up the slip and you're going to come back. You make a mistake, you're gone. So I used to fill the slip, get the money back, and I had to hand it over, make sure the accounts were tallied in a little passport looking like book. And that was called the passbook. But the reality today, fast forward it. And I took my daughter to an ATM. And she looked at the ATM and she said, interesting. And then I showed her the cash withdrawal slip. She said, what? Why would you do this? Why would you go through this process if you could just do that? And that's the reality. This has come in, an interactive machine came into being around the 1960s. And that was first in Japan, which was to give out loans. Now, who would have thought giving out loans would become eventually dispensing cash and, getting information, getting checks, getting payments. So that is the fast forward. So today we are roughly around 1:3,000 of ATM machines around the world, which is a lot of ATM machines. Of course, a lot of you would say, why isn't there a mobile ATM machine? That will be maybe the future of it. But the reality today is that it's already very convenient. I haven't visited my bank in a zillion years, in certain cases, never. Now, some other examples, which are the, more examples that you can even see. And hopefully your generation has seen this, right? When you went into an airport, you had to stand in a queue, and there was no social distancing. So we used to stand in queues, which was like bustling. But if you see that changed. And that's thanks to the interactive kiosk that came in 2012. Now, of course, it came in India much later, but the reality is this kiosk originally was an interactive kiosk that came in the 1970s and 80s. So, which is where an interactive kiosk would come in an application for, say, an airport. Now, does that mean that, say, all those people who worked at the airport are no longer there? Not true. They're all there. The reason is because they're doing different things, and they're doing actually exception management. They're doing actually customer catering, which earlier was never the case. Earlier, you were going to miss your flight because if there was a bigger queue, you just missed the flight. Now that's not the case. I mean, now when I say it's not the last 2 years, it's prior to that. But if you were to think of it in 2019, that's the exception management that came in. A lot of focus to a customer. And that is all about value creation. And in my mind, that's really important, because if you're doing and using our technology to make sure that the end user is having a brilliant experience, even if that end user is a teenager, is a 70-year-old person, is a young adult mom, doesn't matter. It can be anybody, but the user experience is what counts. And that's what automation and technology has been doing. Now, this is more of a recent example. This is happening in certain countries because we see that automation, we used to think, oh, nurse's job cannot be automated. I don't think so. It's just a temperature taking and, just a basic information. The reality is that the number of people who had to be clicked in for the temperature, how did those machines start evolving? How did the equipment start evolving? How did the person who was taking the information started evolving? Because there's only so many resources. There's only so much training that's happening. There's so many interns. So how do you make it fast forward? This is where certain examples came into picture and hopefully to the rescue. And if you talk about AI has, like the way, my previous speaker did speak about, has a lot of elements. And AI can never be looked at saying, all right, there is Matrix, and that's the movie that I saw in AI, and that's what I understood of it. not reality. There's a lot more to it, right? There is a lot more background to it, which means automation is one piece of it, which is the industry that I am heavily involved in. There is machine learning, which is where my counterparts are. And what do they do in machine learning? They're writing codes. And what do they write codes for? For example, if there was an image, like I think we saw the example there in the previous speaker as well. There are mistakes that happen, right? And how do you correct that mistake? This is where a code comes into picture. If I wrote a code today, and let me rephrase that. If one of you wrote that code today of saying that this is how you identify a human being. If Meera comes and stands in front of the camera and says, "Scan me right now," you're going to look at the size of her eyebrow, you're going to look at her nose, you're going to look at her lips, and you're going to look at the jaw size and blah, blah, blah. So that's your code that you're going to have certain points or sensor points. Now that code you will teach to self-teach, and that's where machine is learning, right? Because you're writing that code, by the way. What happens eventually 6 months later, because so many images have been fed into the system, it's going to start seeing, okay, what's the gap between the eyebrows? What's the gap between the eyebrow and the eyelids? What's the gap between the nostrils? And what's, it's going to start thinking a little more. And the thinking is because you have enabled that thinking. It's because you have made the machine to say, start looking at points which will identify and, a different person who looks like Meera, but is not Meera to a Meera, right? I mean, that is the whole point, which is where this information is extremely important, right? Now, if you look at the other example of IoT, and I think IoT has so many brilliant examples. One of it is in the last year itself, an insurance company in Europe has actually asked people, Europe and even in certain cases in the US, have asked people to start wearing smartwatches. Now, one would think, what has smartwatches got to do with, say, everything that's going on with insurance? Well, a smartwatch tracks basically how many steps have I done today? Am I basically exercising enough? Am I getting too excited? Because there are times that I get an alert saying, take a deep breath. There are also enough and more than enough examples of smartwatches getting smarter by the day, where we are seeing that it's able to trigger certain points to say, here's where you're going to, have basically X, Y, Z, or based on your history of how you've been working out, this is where you should be. Now, these are connection points. And to be honest, you see it all around you. There are a lot of examples around you. Now, one of the other interesting and a very different analogy to be taken up is the consolidation. If you look at the industry, there's a consolidation. By the way, I realize we're at 5:10, and maybe I'll do a time check to see, is it okay for us to extend? I'm so sorry, I should have done that.
It's okay, ma'am. You can extend, no problem.
Sure, thank you. And if you look at it around here, right? I mean, one would ask, say today, there is a software company again, which is working on, say, it's a small little box, it's a shoe size box that is with a software's help can tell you if you are not, your belt is not on, which a lot of cars do these days, but it's also the fact that if you're on the cell phone, if you're not following the traffic rules and all of that. Now, just having that box has ensured that not just the safety goes up and the number of accidents come down, but there is also the governance of governing. So there is the box that's right there. So that your tickets and the number of things that are point system to your license is involved in it. It becomes the variables that people are also cautious. There is also that factor. But if we keep that factor aside for a minute, that's a great input for saying in the future, when there is a self-driving car, which is a few decades from now, it's going to be able to take a lot of input and data from this. Now you'd wonder, any which way self-driving car is going to come, what is the shoebox going to do? That's where this will feed into that. An output of one is an input for another. And that is where all of the data comes in. Because if we can start saying that this is the signal where we get the maximum number of accidents, or this is the car, like there was a prediction, I think at some point in time, that said a car that's red will get the maximum accidents. Now, why did somebody in the statistics world come up with this hypothesis? They must have done some study, right? So which is where I think you need to even start looking at, and which is what will help in eventually the future trends to come in. Like, is it the right signal? Is there a car park next to it? Is there somebody crossing the road? Everything, all these become variables to make a decision. Now you would ask how AI will change the future. Now, if you think of it, AI can change the future in the way that there are two ways to go about looking at it, right? In everything that we do, there is certain technology that is there. If there is technology, there's data that is getting generated. If there is data, then there is, machine learning that can happen through that. And that can be a feed in and to connect to a lot of things, which means an IoT can come into picture. So if you look at all of that, that's how at a minuscule levels and small steps, baby steps, but at a larger scale, this is happening. This is already happening. Say if eventually, and it is from, look at it in the other way. As a customer, if somebody called you and said, Larissa, today you're wearing yellow and black, I'm going to sell you a yellow and black car. Now, is it that it's your favorite color, not your favorite color? Nobody knows, right? It's possible that based on the trend, like for example, somebody who likes white, they would say, all right, maybe they like peace, and let's, peg them for, say, an NGO work. And, then there would be a call that would come and saying, would you be interested in investing in an NGO? So how does AI change things? This is how it changes. There are times that there will be mistakes, like somebody will call you and say, please apply for a data entry job for 4,000 rupees. But those are the exceptions. But largely the data will be able to predict, and the more it collects the data, the more it's going to be able to predict better. There are places, there are moralities, there are things that people are comfortable, not comfortable with data sharing and privacy and all of that. But that's a different topic altogether. And I don't think we should get into it, because I have a point of view, and I'm sure each one of you have a point of view of saying, is it good? Is it not? Like there are spaces that I'm okay with my data getting, extracted and being shared. There are places that I'm not very much. So there is this part as well, and which is where I think each of you who's going through, all of these trainings and understanding how this works, it's about how do you make it work better. So let's talk about how you can make a difference. How and where will you come into picture? If you talk about skill sets, if you talk about everything that an individual does, a human does, even though every CEO today or a CXO is talking about investing in automation and AI, and it being the top priority, right? How do you then secure what you do, what I do, what all of us do, right? How do we make sure that that happens? There are a lot of things. And that's where I think the dynamics have to come into picture. If you look at it, there is an inversion in the labor pyramid, and I have started seeing it very, very, very clearly. So if I were to talk about it, this is how the labor pyramid looked like to a large extent when I started my work and my career. So a lot of data entry work, very little at a cognitive or a decision making, because there was nobody to make those. I mean, exceptions only were being handled at the top level. Half the time it's the escalations or exceptions that are getting, passed on to the senior leadership. So nobody was able to make that. But today, you know what? Everybody who's starting a role and people that are coming in even as interns are making decisions, are actually providing insights on how to make a better decision. How are they able to do that? Not that, I know, of course, education has also changed. But if you look at it, it's because a lot of labor pyramid is changing. We don't want people to do data entry work. We want people to think. We want people to start analyzing all the things that are there. If there is a set of data, like for example, Google generates a lot of data. Does it know what to do with all of the data? Not really. That is where all of us will come into picture, where you understand how the data can be used for the benefit of an end user. It's about, there is an important and a funny phrase that I think I had at the start of my career, where one of my managers, because we started in the tech firm, and this is just a joke, actually told us, because we went ahead and changed our email IDs and we did a mess, created employee IDs, and we did something in the back end, like literally hacked into the system of HP, and we did some sort of things that we are not proud of today, but at that time we were very proud of, because we were like, oh, we could do this to an HP system. Our manager walked in and she just looked at it and she said, technology in the hands of monkeys. And we all first we laughed a lot, but later it hit us. Until date, in fact, that's become an analogy that my husband and I use it with all my friends. And that is the truth. It's about how do you use the technology to enable you? How do you use the technology to make your life easier, of everybody's life easier? Are you able to drive those insights? Are you able to make the machine think? Because if you're going to be thinking that, let me not give out my writing job to somebody, not the truth. You will continue to write, but somebody else will be smart enough to figure out a way to not write. Somebody else will be able to figure out a way to say, oh, voice to text, let's get better at it. How do we avoid texting altogether? How do we avoid writing altogether? Somebody will come up with that, right? And which is where the capabilities are important. So each of you need to think. Now, how do you think? Now, this is a lot of things that, you guys could ask and you guys could inquire and be interested in. We've had many roles and we've seen an evolution of roles. How do roles in the tech space, in the automation space, in the entire segment change? You need somebody who's like a business growth partner. When I say that, somebody who's thinking from the business side, who understands what the business is. So there is somebody who needs to understand the business. If you're in the business of healthcare, you need to understand the healthcare business. If you're in the technology space, you need to understand the technology, and you should be able to say, how do I increase my growth? How do I exponentially grow year on year? Because that's going to be your target once you start working. That is the person that you collaborate with. If you're not that person, then you collaborate with that person. The next is your analytics and value manager, somebody who looks at the data and says, it's not just numbers. Like if I can show you thousands of line items, how do you make sense out of it? Somebody like, it's easy for me to tell you right now that you have to analyze. How do you analyze data? I have done that manually. I've done that manually by writing macros, by sitting and reading every line item and saying, all right, this is what the customer is saying, listening to CSATs, because we used to sell laptops and printers and everything in HP. And I'll just go through the analysis of understanding which one, what are they trying to say? There's NLP now, but NLP is only so good. Even today, it's about 60, 70% there, not there completely. And over a period of time, it will improve. That is how it is. So how do you become that value manager? How do you create that value? Whether you look at the data scientist, the person who's actually crunching the numbers, whether you look at the data engineer, basically the digital engineer, the person who will break it down for you in the tech space, saying, all right, you need a cloud system, you need this is the server capacity you need. If technology excites you, that's a role for you. Transformation lead. Now, something which I do and I really like is the fact that you think of how does businesses can transform? What can I do to enable that? How can I keep doing things which will change things as a cascading impact? So then coming up with programs, coming up with ideation, I do different things in that. But that is the space that, if that excites you, of how do you pull people in and grab the opportunity of coming up with things that will change at the entire organization level. You can start with your college. You can start with anything that you're doing right now. Solution evangelist, somebody who says, here's step 1 to 10, but step 1 and 2 are absolutely not making sense. How can we reduce it? That can also be like becoming a quality manager, where you look at things and you say, these are mundane. This is something that the data, we can do better crunching. We can use systems here. We can use humans here. We can do that. So that's called a cobot or something like that. So basically, how do you evangelize a solution? How do you become a process expert? Now, there are people out there who still love process. I used to do that initially, who love process, who love to understand step one, what are the sub steps? Step two, what are the sub steps? If that is something that excites you, that's a role for you. Compliance and risk, there will always be. If, always remember this, if the work is being done by a machine, it will be monitored by a human. If the work is being done by a human, it will be monitored by a machine. That's the way that a lot of industry practices are, because you want to make sure that the errors are being caught. Even when you write a code, for example, there is the entire code checking that you do, software quality testing. Now that's very similar. You have to, even if you write something, you have to have somebody test it. Similarly, the compliance and risk managers are the ones who will even predict, saying that, oh, what if there is some issue and this machine goes down, then what do we do? What's our backup plan and all of that? So that's where it comes in. If finding out all the time, like I've planned a movie with my friends, and if that goes bad, what do we do? If that's something that excites you, you're in the space of risk management. Now let's talk about skill sets. What is it that you do today that will help you hopefully identify the roles that you want to get into? Are you a person who's creative, who loves to innovate? And when I say creative and innovative, do you think somebody who came up with saying, let's do the pyramids, actually said, let's look historically how many pyramids were made and let's make a pyramid? I don't think so. There was no data that was thought of at that point in time. Somebody designed, thought about it, saying, I want to design this, I want to do this. And that's how they did it. Sometimes it needs a dreamer. It needs somebody who can look at it and say, this is possible. This is the art of possible. And that's a very common corporate term that we use, saying the art of possible. What is the art of possible? If you have that imagination in you, you are that person to say, this is the art of possible, and start thinking. If you walk into a supermarket, or if you order something online, think of how the systems can be better. The starting point there itself will be a good point for you to cascade impact, start thinking differently. If you just make it a habit, you will get there. Strategic mindset. How can today, say for example, where I order from Amazon, forget Amazon, Big Basket. How can Big Basket become bigger? How can they become 10 times better? How come they're not supplying in, say, Jharkhand, or say in a smaller remote area? What is the strategic mindset? How can we change that? Right? I mean, that is where you will come into picture. Data savvy. Being data savvy is a must for you guys. When I say it's a must, you need to at least be comfortable with data. You can't just say, data is not my game. You don't need to be a mathematician. You don't need to be a statistician. But like when I did my statistics, I didn't know the application of it. But understanding the data is an extremely important thing. Either you learn it in the job or you accept it today. So start looking at, say, certain trends that you look at. Like there are trends, right? There are always, for everything, there is a graph. That graph is being generated because somebody is sitting and crunching that data. Try to understand that graph. When you look at if somebody were to actually look at all your historically exams, right? They'll be able to tell you that this is a subject you're interested in. This is where the prediction is. If you have the time and the patience, crunch that data. Try to see what it tells about you. Similarly, business acumen. Understanding the business is important. You can't just walk into a Big Basket and say, I think I can make your business very good. I already have a strategic plan for you. You need to understand, what is it? Why do they do what they do? Why did they decide not to do this? And why did they decide to do this? So these are things that you need to understand. The business is important for you, and there is no getting away with it. Machines can only do so much. Your business acumen is important. That's why you need to understand that. Relationship management, there's absolutely nothing that has been written and coded so far. There are chatbots, but chatbots are today very, very not so successful. I mean, we aspire for, I think there was a sports car in India that I remember. I used to just log in to interact with their chatbot. It was very, very good. Like if you have a chat, they can even say, I'm thinking. And this is very, very fun for me, because I'm like, how did it know that it's pulling up the data? And every time it's a different thing that it gives me a phrase. Relationship management is extremely important. There's only so much that everybody will like interacting with say a machine or easy to do things. There are times that that exception management will still land with a person. And that is where you and your role will come into picture. You have to think of relationship management is an important aspect, because that is where the human element comes in. And people work a lot, and AI is a space that people are working to make it like a human, but it's far from it. It's not even anywhere close to it. So you are you, and you will always be that unique. So cash into that biggest advantage that we have as humans: agility and change orientation. Now, if somebody tells me that, let's take the same pyramid example for a minute, actually. Now, if someone tells that, listen, the stones are not available, the size is not available, how would we get the pyramid to be formed? Now, that's where the agility and the change orientation comes in. There were crises. There are things that they faced, but they still kept with their vision. They went back. They did sometimes the change in the strategy. They did a lot of things. And any of the examples around our world, if you see, these roles are played either by the same person, sometimes more than one, or sometimes by different people. And one role could be split further into like multiple people. But these are roles that are played. And they are the skill sets which are needed. If you want to evolve, if you want to say that I need to continue to be relevant, you need to keep asking yourself, are you willing to change? If you're willing to change, if you're willing to be all of these, then you are most relevant that there is in the industry today. So this is where I talk about certain personas. Personas are basically where and I'm sure in your group you will identify. Sorry, I think someone's off mute, right? Is okay. So personas is where I think you're going to kind of in your group, or you're in your family or in your friends, you're going to find this somebody who will always be a problem solver, somebody who will be like saying, let's, have you checked out this new gadget? Have you seen this? And all of that. You're going to find somebody who's going to say, oh, did you find this deal? This deal is there. I think we should go and, check it out. And there is always a friend or a family member who's a dreamer who says, I know this can happen. You just go and do it. And there is a person who regulates all of this. He says, let me come together. There's a dreamer and there is a realistic. Let's get you guys together. You will always find these personas. Sometimes these personas are things that you revolve around. Sometimes you're playing one role. Sometimes you're moving around to play different roles in different situations. Sometimes you are the person who's a dreamer and somebody else is a regulator. So it is about identifying this as well. In every crisis, you will see that there are these people who are there. And this is a standard and this is a given. Now, what I would like, now given that I'm talking to students, my exciting bit and my thing that I would like you to consider, especially when you're looking at the future. If you look at the SDGs, which is the sustainable goals, it's extremely important for you to not just look at how do I create value for the business. Today, what nobody will tell you in any business school or any place is the fact that you need to also look at the sublined factors. Things like, what does a brand stand for? Like, one thing that you might notice is things like Big Basket is very sustainable. It does a lot of recycling of its things, but there are others who do a lot more. Now, if I'm a person who believes in recycling, will I go to a place which does a heavy packaging? No, I'm not going to. I will pay a little extra, but I'm not going to order from, say, a place that comes with 20 kgs of packaging, right? I'm not going to order from them. Same thing with a global impact. Now, if the organization understands the impact it is creating, it is extremely important as individuals for you to understand the global impact it will create. If the organizations you work with haven't been sensitive or aren't that sensitive yet, you will see that these factors have to start playing a role. Even if you're in the tech space, these are things that you will ask, you will try to understand, and that is what will make you stand out from the rest of them. What is your relationship with the world? How are you looking at others? Do you not care? Because beyond a certain point, you're not going to like arrogant CEOs. You're going to like CEOs who are going to be actually making a difference. You're going to like CEOs who are going to be making a positive contribution. you are all going to be the future leaders. This is where you will play a role. You're not just doing to increase profit margins, but you will also do to have a cascading impact, because this is a long-term considerations. And while there are the top 6, SDGs around the world that are being, always saying that, eradicate poverty, make sure education is happening, but there is also one of the factors that has been considered is technology, how innovation, how technology can play a role. And which is where you have to understand that that's how important technology is becoming. It is also going to help in our SDGs at some point in time. And how it will do that, that's a decision that's going to be hopefully, further discussed in the 2030 meeting. But what you are, by the time you are going to become the leaders, this is going to be the way of the current. And for you to know that is very, very important. Like I said, sustainable transformation will be digital. Digital transformation will be sustainable. You want to be inclusive. Remember that. You don't want to just make a decision based on numbers, based on things. You will also want to consider a lot more factors. And that is where, like I said, the I factor has to come in everything that you do. How do you make that stand out? Hopefully, we've covered a lot of it. But I think if we were to even talk about, right, to understand the ecosystem of trust, the culture, the perception of a technology, silos, break it down further. And that is where you're going to make an impact. And it's about how do you enable, say, your grandmother to start using phone for her benefit? How do you make your family to appreciate a smart home may be the right choice for them? How do you make sure, how do you come up with these things? It's because you want to understand, first of all, the trust factor. You also want to understand the perception of that technology with your family, with your friends, and how do you bring it into your day-to-day lives? And again, like I was mentioning a while ago, I want you to go back and think in your everyday life of how you're going to be integrating the digital technology ecosystem, the culture, the people. This is what is going to be the future. This is what is going to make a difference. You're going to make a difference by trying to think of all of these factors. And with that, I would conclude to say that, I guess it's not the strongest of species. My favorite quote, it's actually the most intelligent, but the one that is the most responsive to change. And it goes back to what I was talking about, being agile and being open to change. So you guys, you're at the start of yet to start your careers or already have started your careers. So remember, change is going to be part of your lives. And sometimes you might think, I'm not willing to change. I'm not willing to change. It's like a lot of us said, I'm not willing to work from home no matter what. I remember having coffee with my friends in the office and saying, those guys were like, I'm never, ever working from home because I'll go nuts. And it's been almost a year and a half. I call them and they're quite okay. They're surviving. They're not just surviving, they're thriving. So what changed? We had to, either you accept the change, you adapt to it, or something will change you. So sometimes, it's important for you to identify in your day-to-day lives, how do I become most responsive to change? There are things that you will stand up for, but there are things that you will evolve yourselves with. And in the career that I've had, if I look back to my first role, to what I have done, of course, there is the growth that I have gone through with, but there is substantial change in the way even the first job was done today. And that is the point. That 5% is evolving, is constantly changing. And that is something that we need to be open for. With that, I'm going to stop and pause and see and hand back to Larissa, to you. And how do we want to stop, or do we want to take questions? It's up to you.
Thank you, ma'am. You have helped us widen our understanding of intelligent automation, working with an analytical, data-oriented approach while walking us through the required corporate skill set. I'm sure it has ignited an interest in many of our participants and will surely help potential job seekers to navigate the corporate world. So now, can we have the Q&A session? Okay. So anyone who wishes to ask a question, kindly unmute yourself, turn on your video and ask your question.
Hello, sir. Hello.
Hi.
Good evening. My name is Avdut Bhuvad. My question is for you, Mr. Satyen Jadeja, sir. So, how do you see AI impacting the future of healthcare systems? Means how safe it is to use AI in such systems?
Right. I think it's a very relevant question currently that we are going through a pandemic, and health has become a priority for globally countries, organizations, individuals, right? It's still, I'll say that health, we are at a very initial stages of adopting a lot of technologies. Today, most of the treatment or the entire ecosystem, from drug manufacturers to distributor, hospitals, the caregivers, everything is very basic elements of technology being used. So we are going to see more and more infusion of technology in certain set of areas. Human treatment is a very complex subject, right? It will take a lot of years to really come at some kind of a very AI driven approach, or it may not even happen, but it will just augment the decisions of the doctors or the caregivers in terms of how to give a better care, or the public health today, right? So that way we'll see a gradual adoption of technology. Right now, you see one fantastic example that suddenly a country like India is now facing the entire COVID situation. Right, we are 1.2 billion people. I mean, think from the health ministry, if they had to really monitor, say, 1 billion people, that have I given you a dose or not, right? Maybe if the technology was not there, do you think it was possible? Technology is kind of helping them to give a visibility that who has taken the first dose, who has taken the second dose. Suddenly we are seeing that, okay, on one login, if I do a system like this COVID portal, I can see all the hospitals of the country, which was last year was not there, right? So now imagine that we keep kind of improving upon that. That tomorrow they want to run another campaign of some other vaccine, or tomorrow they want to say, I want to see all the hospital beds in India. Suppose somebody asks a question that what are the hospital beds in India, how many are available, right? Then suddenly you have a visibility thanks to the technology. So it's a gradual change, and the areas of change will be somewhere there is a good impact technology can bring, some areas it may not bring. But we are seeing experimentations happening in terms of, say, can we detect cancer, can we detect diabetes? So those research are initial stages till it arrives at a very where a government and regulatory bodies, if they approve that yes, this is really remarkable. So we'll see a different pockets of interventions, and some will be large, some will be small, and gradually improving. And technologies like AI, digital will keep happening. Health analytics is a big area, right? So health treatment, all that is getting more and more technical.
Yes, I got it.
Hello, my question is to Meera ma'am.
Hi,
Hello.
Aparna. Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, as you said that we are working on systems that will make tasks which will make our lives easy, right? So as the example that you gave of self-driving cars, so do you think that the robots will take over our jobs?
That's a question that I get asked a lot. And thanks for asking that question, Aparna. I'm sure it's running in your colleagues' minds. The reality is that, like the way I kind of emphasized on the labor pyramid, right? It's not about taking over the job. It's about the fact that the jobs that we don't want to do, we want to pass it on. And the reality is that we used to earlier escape it by looking for promotions or looking for another organization. Today, the choice is to actually automate it and move it out. And that is where the good or the interesting parts come in, which is how you all also have to look at the fact that how do you use technology to enable you? Today, for example, I think my parents used to make a lot of phone calls, right? There was a whole categorization of international PCO and STD. And there was no plans that were sold at that point in time to identify, hey, you made a lot of international calls. Why don't you, you use this plan? We used to just get standard thing, whether our neighbors used a lot more phone capacity than us, or even if our neighbors didn't use anything, we all were on the same plans, and we used to go through different varying bills. Over a period of time, today that I look at it, the technology has worked so brilliantly that now you're not just because your call history is available. A lot of people who in fact ask you and sell you plans will tell you that, listen, we see historically you've been actually making a lot of international calls, or you're using a lot of 4G. Why don't you actually take up an internet plan and don't really bother about calls and stuff? Because we see that you're mostly only on technology. Now, that kind of a thing is something that you would like to hear as a consumer. Similarly, imagine how you can use this data for your own job to make your life easier. You have the way and means to actually write codes with the data that will be available, say if you were in the telecom industry. And at the same time, you could even come up with a plan, a strategic plan for it, right? So that is what you can do, which is where I think my emphasis has been, that we need to talk and identify where we fit in and how do we fit in and how do we enable the technology for us. Because the self-driving cars is still a lot away while we're talking about it like it's going to be released in the next, the next set of cars. But the reality is it's far, far from the reality. I mean, it's still a dream. It's still not something that's going to happen like in a year's time. So which is where I think you all need to know this, that how do you play a role to make your life easier? If you're not driving to your office, then you're using that time to actually do something else, right? So that is what you need to think of. I hope I've answered that question.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Hi, I had a question for Satyam Jadeja, sir.
Hi.
Hello, sir. Sir, I'm Thomas Johnson.
Hi, Thomas.
Sir, you mentioned about the deepfake technology that was used during the American elections and how that was a topic of debate there. How can we use that very technology to our advantage and implement it in a positive way right here?
It's a very, you're right. So it's a how you leverage a technology for a better purpose, right? Always the purpose is going to be very important, right? I'll give you a very simple example, and this was happened in one of the US university where, like, you studied AI as a subject, right, in your college. So they also studied AI as a subject in their university or the college thereof, and they assigned a facilitator for that. So students used to ask them question, when is this exam due, when is the session, where is the question paper, answers, things like that. And after the course was over, they said, okay, how was the facilitator's performance and feedback? Everybody gave fantastic, 5 marks, 5 out of 5. Later on, it was realized that there was a system and a kind of a technology only supporting them. So it's a good use. Another interesting example I'll tell you is that in today COVID pandemic, because we are all witnessing it, we developed a kind of a bot where they were asking questions about, because the things are evolving so much, right? So everybody was asking questions, when I visit hospital, where is the COVID care center? So the Ministry of Health and all, they set up a bot and they answered millions of queries. I mean, we don't come to know about all this, but that bot was used in a positive way to address millions of concerns of Indian citizens, right? Another good example, last year, if you recall, the banks gave a moratorium because everybody had taken a loan and because of COVID, they couldn't pay the installment, right? Suddenly RBI said, 6 months you did not pay for the installments. So every bank had to quickly service their customers. Now the banks were flooded with so many calls. So again, they leveraged the bot technology to help quickly process. So you can think about good ways, helping patients, helping travelers, helping customers, right? Helping healthcare professionals. In various ways, you can leverage this technology for a better purpose and make it more productive. As Meera said, that repetitive work, you are not productive. So can you let the repetitive work be done by help of technology, whereas you focus on something more productive and good for your organization or your society or the academics or whatever that you are contributing to. Then technology becomes your enabler to do that better.
Thank you, sir.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
My question is to Meera Sanghvi, ma'am. Did you talk about the intelligent automation concept? Can you explore it more with example?
Sure, absolutely. Thanks for asking that question again. And if you're talking about intelligent automation, right? It's like the way the term says, break it down into two: automation, intelligent automation. So if automation is to basically remove the mundane out of your job, intelligent automation is to be smartly removing that mundane out of your job. And how do you do that? Or for example, how do you use it? For example, again, going back to the examples that I was sharing, which is the interactive kiosk or an ATM machine. If you look at any of these examples, right, the reality is that if somebody told you there was an interactive kiosk in, say, or somebody told me about it in, say, 1980s, 1990s, after maybe I was in my school and somebody told me that, I would have been of the opinion that how is that going to apply or how is that going to work? It's about finding the application. Intelligent automation comes into picture by adding certain smartness in the way of either when you look at an automation, you make it into an automation that becomes smarter for you. For now, let's take some more examples besides the internet kiosk or the ATM example that I shared. If you look at today's world, right? If everything that you have, which is your data, which is your automation, in the fact, I think Satyam also covered Zomato's drone technology, right? If somebody looked at that and made a connection with, say, Google Maps, with the drone technology, plus your eating habits, and certain times gave out samples to you because they realized that this is a person who likes to sample out, you're making that automation, which is a physical bot in this case, but you're making that bot also use the background that is happening to make smart, inventory decisions, which is, say, for example, any which ways I was going to lose out, say, a bakery product, because end of the day, most of the bakeries, as a point of sale, do dispose of their bakery products. So how do you make that smarter? By about 4 p.m., looking at historical data, you'll kind of make a prediction saying, I'm expecting another 4 to 5 cakes to be sold, but there's a lot more. How about I give these samples out? And that way, I don't need to give discounts, but just tasting it, I know for a fact a lot of people will come back and order. If this wasn't a COVID phase, all of us would be very interested in trying out testers and trying out different things, right? This is the kind of intelligent automation we can talk about. And when I'm giving you examples, I'm talking about data intelligence, but you can talk about the same thing in the automation space as well. Like the same thing, again, the example of having a shoebox in your car, right? It is becoming smarter over a period of time, or the face recognition, it is becoming smarter over a period of time because of the help of the software plus the automation that you have put into place. Otherwise, there would have been an actual police who would have been checking to say how many rules have been broken, how many, incorrect parkings have been done. And that's the cost to, say, the country in this case. Certain times it's cost to the company, certain times it's a further delay in time to market, which is an important, metric for most organizations. So how do you get them to, say, try out new things? How do you get this automation to work for you? And that is where you find out. Either it is through whatever automation that you have built, how do you add the data to it? How do you add NLP to it? How do you add anything additional to it so that that automation becomes smarter? It's basically layering. You're just layering. You're layering an automation, you're layering it with smartness. And that smartness is something that you come up with, again, in the form of codes. So you kind of come up with an additional code to say, here's where the automation is there, but let's make it smarter. If you're collecting all the temperatures in the hospital, how does it become smarter to make it, basically next time to come up with a prediction saying, every Saturday there's going to be a spike, so make sure no staff is on leave. How does that come into picture? Because there is data and you have built in an intelligence. So if you're analyzing the data as a human, you're doing that intelligence part of it, but sometimes you're enabling the automation to become intelligent. And that is where intelligent automation comes in. I know I spoke for a lot of examples there. I hope.
If I can add in.
Absolutely.
So it's, I'll share some simple experience from my banking experience. But I didn't get your name. So what I'll say is that, for example, your parents are planning to take a home loan, right? So earlier, what used to happen that they decided, okay, they search for the house and everything. And after that, they found out, okay, this is within the budget. Then they'll approach the bank saying, we want a loan, right? And then bank will say, give me this paper, that paper, do this. Why don't you come back again? Sorry, you missed that. Why don't you come visit? So it's frustrating. By the fourth or fifth interaction, visit to the branch, that person is there, not there, and then you submit the paper. Then they'll take 30 days to get back and say, okay, provisionally you are giving a loan, and this is the thing. And by, say, 40th day, maybe the dispersal of the loan amount is ready. Now we are going to enter into a world where, when your parents are thinking of buying a house, a bank can set up a portal where you can search for houses, right? So when you are thinking, bank is engaging with you when you are thinking of buying a house and not when you want a loan. That's the difference. So the bank is engaging with you in a very smart manner, as Meera said, and they are anticipating, okay, they are assessing your budget, they are assessing your credit score. By the time you reach to decision to take a home loan, they're saying, sir, we are ready with your proposition. We have seen all your transactions. We have your salary account, understanding everything. We are provisioning you, giving you a loan ready for this much amount without visiting a branch. And you say yes, in, say, 2 days time, the amount will be paid out to the builder or whatever that is, right? That means there is a backend, the set of technologies working like automation, AI, natural language processing. I may be even talking to a chatbot saying, I want a loan. And the chatbot is responding and giving some basic FAQs, passing on to the loan officer for further processing and things like that. So it's a combination of technologies, reimagining the customer experience, and leveraging multiple technologies to completely reimagine the process. That's where your intelligent automation. Think about, you are going to a petrol pump and then you fill up the petrol, then you swipe your credit card and you pay, and then imagine a car from your Android CarPlay or Apple CarPlay, straight away the payment is transferred to the petrol pump vendor. You need not even swipe a card. That's an intelligent automation. So these are some examples emerging, and you will see more and more happening.
Thank you, sir.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, Tanmay.
Yes, okay. So So I have a question, but before I ask my question, first I would like to say thank you very much for organizing today's webinar. And it has been very instructive and inspiring to learn about AI from very experienced people who have been in this field for a very long time.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Yes, so the next question goes to Satyen, sir. And I would like to ask if you could elaborate a little bit about robotics. Because I'm sure we all have some idea about this robotics field, how it's very vast and it's expanding just like the other fields, but it's very hard to comprehend, to get a clear understanding because it's so vast.
Yeah.
And you can see many examples. It's happening all around us, as mentioned in the presentation.
Absolutely. Hey, that's a very important question. So I think I don't get your first name. If you can tell me your first name.
Tanmay.
Oh yes, sir.
Tanmay.
Yes, sir.
Tanmay, it's a great question, and I think it really shows your interest in that. Robotics, and Meera can also add in there, but has been there for many years. And the first image that you think about robotics is obviously those more from the marketing perspective, some robots walking around. I mean, but they are of not much of productive use per se. But the real value add you'd have seen on the industrial plants, right? If you see the today automotive production lines, there are significant amount of robotics happening in the car manufacturing or car assembling. And similarly, in other manufacturing or other industries, or even if you today visit a Amazon warehouse, very large warehouses, maybe even in India, they may be doing it, but it's like automatically picking up the particular packet and putting it at the right place for the dispatch and for the transportation. So and new technologies like wearables are coming in and all that coming together. But what is now pivoting is that, okay, robots are there in one, they are doing some amount of work in one form or other, whether on the assembly lines or cleaning your house or doing other set of activities. A drone could be also treated as a robot because it is kind of doing some activity there. But the most important thing, and we little bit alluded to that, is something called Internet of Things. So when you make these robots connected, right, to various systems, and you start controlling multiple things. So what we call as IoT 4.0, Internet of Things 4.0 is where we are going towards, where you're talking about smart factories, smart manufacturing, smart distribution, smart, so a lot of smartness is coming in every aspect of industrial activities as well as services activities, right? So we'll see more and more either a software manifestation or a hardware manifestation of robots in one form or other. And that all would be more interconnected. That's where we are seeing this whole Internet of Things going to explode, where machine to machine communications, messaging, and all will happen. So we will see manifestation of robotics will be very different as we progress. It will not be just that robot with two hands, two legs. It may be in a different form and function, but we'll see more and more manifestation in terms of smart devices. Your refrigerators will become more smarter. Your microwaves will become more smarter. So the manifestation will keep changing. So you may not see a robot, but it is intelligent. The devices will get more intelligent.
Yeah. And if I can add to what he's saying, right? I mean, the reality is that if you look around us, and a lot of you would say, I don't see a robo in my house. The reality is there is a lot of automation that has already kicked into our houses. A washing machine. Now, if somebody told, like, say, 2 generations back to your grandparents that there's going to be a machine that is actually going to swirl, and going to actually wash your clothes really good, and they're going to come out sparkling clean, nobody's going to believe that. But the reality is today we can't think of living a life without washing machine. That is a certain form of automation that has happened. The intelligence will come in later, but the reality is there are automations which are around us. A microwave, who would have thought you put it in a box and you take out, it's all heated food. It's something your edible is going into a box and then you're eating it. Things like automatic vacuum cleaner, things like, having a dishwasher. These are all forms of automations that are there around us. The difference is that because we've started living with it, we sometimes feel like this is not an example of an automation per se. It is it's difficult for us to constantly call these as automation, and which is where I think you need to look around us, and you're going to find a zillion examples of where all the automation exists. So that's one of the things that I wanted to add. Like, for example, in the last year, because of COVID, one of the things that has happened is the luxury good, which is one of the branded bag manufacturing organization, has decided to become touchless. So what happens is, if I order, say, an XYZ bag, I'm paying a premium. Now that premium is also being guaranteed that it hasn't, it has also gone through a quarantine of 14 or 15 days, because they've made sure that it's a touchless process. And that touchless process is also helping goes back to what I was talking about, risk management. When people were not able to hit the manufacturing units, like even it happened in HP, we saw a sudden spike in printers because printers were dead, according to a lot of people. But the reality is printers came back. How did they come back? Because of a lot of work that happened. But coming back to the manufacturing unit, what has happened is that the entire unit has become where people couldn't walk into an office. And you will realize in the BCP planning that you will do once you join an organization, about 10% of your work has to be planned for BCP, right? If this site goes down, say India site goes down because if there is a earthquake, how does a China site or how does an Australia site still continue to work? So there are these backup plans that you do, and the backup plan is beautifully being operated right now because of robotics. So what's happening is, if people say even if there is a quarantine, the robots can still process and make sure that the demand of the customer is being met. So this is the kind of examples that you see in today's world and everyday world. Thank you again.
Thank you, ma'am and sir, for the explanation.
Thank you.
So it is more about how we can use AI, this vast branch, to enhance our lives. It's not so much about just creating machines just for the sake of creating machines. It's about creating them so that they make our day-to-day tasks easy and convenient to carry out.
With a noble purpose. I mean, it has to have a positive purpose to your objectives.
Yes. Okay, so once again, thank you very much for this webinar.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Yes, ma'am, you can go ahead.
So I think we've had a fruitful virtual exchange of thoughts today, looking at the enthusiastic Q&A session. So we shall conclude with the Q&A session for now. Dear participants, the link for the feedback will be posted now on Zoom as well as on YouTube. Kindly fill out the feedback form so that we can organize similar webinars in future, so as to aid with the academic growth and provide the much needed industrial exposure. The certificates of the same will be issued in a day or two. I now request Ms. Sumedha Barve to extend the vote of thanks.
Yes. Thank you, Larissa ma'am. On behalf of Parle Vidyalaya Association, Satya College, Department of Information Technology, I take this opportunity to propose concluding remark and vote of thanks. I would like to express my gratitude to both today's speakers, Satyen Jadeja sir and Meera Sanghvi madam. We are really enlightened with your knowledge and presence. I would like to thank Satyen sir for shedding light on artificial intelligence, various areas of AI, role of AI in digital platforms, and future of business models. Meera Sanghvi madam's guidance have opened up new opportunities in front of our students. I'm sure all our students will surely look into AI and robotics for their bright career. I would like to thank our principal, Dr. M.R. Rajwade sir, for his enthusiastic support. Last but not least, our heartfelt thanks to all participants for their active participation. With these warm words, we move to the end of today's program.